G'day guys, it's Coach here. Hope you're all doing well. We are doing all things Broken Realms. We're kicking this off with Broken Realms Morathi, but we're not talking Jaws of Cain. We are talking Idoneth Deepkin, and my very special guest is going to be Seasons of War, absolute veteran of the Deepkin. It is Jordan. G'day, Jordan. How are you, mate?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about our fish elves.
Mate, haven't you guys got a few little sneaky changes that have come through this book?
Yeah, nothing but good changes for us, which is nice.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, Deepkin have gotten an absolute awesome little benefit when it comes to this particular book. So I'm excited to chat to you and kind of find out how this is kind of changing your list building.
For sure.
First things, I guess, I think I don't know if your screen's frozen up or if my screen's frozen up, but we'll see how we go here. I thought I'd just ask, first off, how did you get into Sigmar? Why did you set up the channel, and why Deepkin? I guess maybe get a bit of an introduction from yourself.
For sure. So how I got into the hobby, like a lot of us, I got in when I was younger as a kid with my brothers, and we played a little bit of everything. Building, painting models. I have remnants of like 10 different armies I started and never finished. But my biggest army back in the day was High Elves, and like many people, took a long break from kind of the hobby for a number of years. Just getting back into it about 2 years ago. Getting back into Warhammer at least. 2 years ago, and just from some friends reintroducing me, and kind of always picked up models and painted them every few years, but really in terms of diving back into the hobby in full, yeah, it was just a couple of years ago. So I came back just after, it would have been, or recently after the first General's Handbook, so I didn't have to deal with any of the issues of no points and all that trouble that caused. But I came back into the hobby in a great time where things were looking good and everyone was happy about the game and loving it, and so it was super exciting to get started when I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool.
In terms of the channel,
no, continue please. The channel.
So yeah, in terms of the channel, I started planning to do the channel pretty soon after I got into it. I have a bit of a video editing background, so obviously I've been able to kind of use those skills for the channel here with the battle reports. So I just really was, when I was getting started back in the hobby, I was getting ready to start doing some events and trying to consume all the content I could, whether it's talks like this one or battle reports and whatnot. And I found that when I was looking and getting started, there weren't a lot of battle reports that necessarily took the strategic tactical approach to the game. So that's something I kind of was looking for myself. So eventually when I got more experience and wanted to start doing my own, that's why I kind of gravitated towards that way. I have many inspirations, one like Honest Wargamer with their kind of tactical overhead coverage. I love the overhead camera of being able to show the movement and positioning, because that's such a big part of the game. But obviously there's an entertainment value to it as well, and even while they're not the most tactical, like mini wargaming is an hour from where I grew up. And I grew up, not grew up, but I watched a ton of their battle reports and whatnot, and love seeing close-ups of the models and that kind of thing. So that's one reason I've incorporated that. So I've stolen inspirations from all over and from many different creators. But yeah, again, really wanting to also showcase the Toronto scene, I think was a big part of the channel. I think we have a great community around here, and it's not, in terms of the global sense, nobody really talks about AOS in Canada very much. So just trying to get some representation for us out there, and we have a ton of amazing players around here, and great people, which is even more important. So always have a lot of fun getting to show things off.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And hopefully, I know Australia is in the future, so hopefully Canada's internet will catch up somehow, and your video won't be all like basically an avatar. Or are you a real person? I don't really know. Maybe you are. This is AI kind of 1.0, and this is your avatar. And you got a lot of love in the chat, by the way, Jordan. But at least your voice is coming through really well. So hopefully the video stream will catch up a little bit, but. Let's talk Deepkin. Now, Broken Realms, for anyone who hasn't heard just yet, is I guess, a new narrative arc that is coming out in Age of Sigmar. We've seen the first book drop. We only can assume there's going to be a whole bunch more leading into, at minimum, General's Handbook 2021. And the Broken Realms narrative is based around Morathi. However, we do get some other things like Stormcast, like Deepkin, like Slaves to Darkness. And basically through this narrative arc and the alliance of Morathi with the Deepkin and kind of some shenanigans, we're not going to kind of spoil the story for you. We've got some rules. Deepkin got some rules. We got a couple of War Scroll rewrites, which is pretty sweet. And you got some mount traits, which I think a lot of people have been begging for. How did you find the overall rule changes before we get into the weeds and actually talk about what you got?
As a whole, again, like I said at the start, all the changes that we've seen for Deepkin are positive ones. Now, I don't think it necessarily pushes the book any stronger than it was necessarily, but it broadens the options. Kind of, Deepkin was always a shallow pool, and now it's a little deeper in terms of what we can realistically take in the list, without, while still being viable at events or competitively or whatnot. Or not feeling bad about taking these models in any capacity. So, great depth that it's added, some more versatility in terms of different builds like we're going to talk about today, some interesting utility and options with even like, the war gear on the sharks and the mount traits like you said. So definitely some interesting options. And I think it just kind of opens up the book and the faction a little more, which is what, everyone from Deepkin players to Deepkin opponents wanted to see out of the army. So great changes all around.
I'll be brutally honest. I'm sick of Deepkin. I actually hate playing Deepkin. And the reason for it is I got really excited about the release. When Idoneth Deepkin came out, I was amazed by the turtles and the sharks and the eels and the eidolon and the thralls and the reavers. I was so close. And then I went to see Aquaman, and I walked out. I'm like, I want a Deepkin army. I want a Deepkin army. Unfortunately, GW prices in Australia kind of stopped me from going down that route. I couldn't afford a third mortgage, but I love the army. But every time I play it, to the exception of Ben Spinetti, who's a champion Australian player, been running Sharks now for 2 to 3 years, it's just eels. I know what you're going to do. Turn 1, you're going to flip the tide. Turn 2, you're going to try to kind of you're either going to come in at turn 2 if you flip the tide, or you're going to come in at turn 3. You're going to you're going to stack up a whole bunch of command abilities from one of your leaders to give you additional attacks. Cool. I'm done. I've done this game. But seeing this book, turtles are good. They've got sharks are good. Thralls have gotten a bit of a boost.
Yep.
There's a whole bunch of things that have happened, and I'm starting to see that list dynamics change. While eels aren't crap, and they haven't just nerfed eels, you are seeing some alternative builds, and for me, that's exciting because I want to have a good game. I'm sure you guys are sick of playing the same eel style again and again and again and again. And I'm sure you want your other toys to be good. So I'm really happy about the changes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Deepkin players more than anyone wanted to be able to play different things, right? You might play eels once in an event, but we play it 5 games at every event. So definitely nice to have a little more variety. And while I've always been a proponent of saying there's a lot more depth than people thought to eels. Like I ran a 30 thralls all last year in my competitive list. For most of this year I ran a Kellion core with a shark and a turtle for most of the year. So again, I think those builds were maybe not the top build, but they were very competitive with the top armies in the meta still. So by no means was it a significant step down, but now they've just gotten a little boost where you're going to see in the general community and more variety to lists, which is exciting. But it means you might see some things that you're not prepared for the first couple times you see Deepkin now.
Yeah, especially like when you start introducing Reavers and Thralls, like not many people have played against Thralls. So either way, I think overall what I'm trying to say here is I'm very excited because I think it's going to give a whole lot of rejuvenation to Idoneth Deepkin. It's going to give some different play styles. We're even talking just before we got on stream, and we'll get to it in a very, very second, that the way you think about your allegiance of terrain, that might slightly change. So I might actually bring up some of the rules. And for anyone who's watched this show in the past, we have done faction focuses. I've done a list review already on Deepkin. So I don't want to spend too much time on the allegiance abilities. I don't want to spend too much time on your Gloomtide boat. But where I'd love to kind of get your thoughts, Jordan, given one, you're a very competitive player. Two, you've already been thinking about your lists from Broken Realms. By the way, guys, we are recording this show pre-FAQ. I don't think there's going to be a lot of big FAQs for this, so I'm kind of comfortable. But also, we do have a winter FAQ coming potentially in the month's time, so points may change. So this is just to give us a bit of a context on how would I run an army. How would I run an army using these new rules? So, Jordan, before we kind of get into the new rules, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts a little bit about your rules. And I guess the big one here is going to be your Tides of Death. Has Broken Realms Morathi changed the way that you look at your allegiance abilities?
Yes and no. I wouldn't say that it's made a huge impact in terms of, there's no obviously changes to the rules themselves. It's just going to be different use of the units you're taking now, and you're kind of mixing up your units potentially a little more. You're just going to be using them with different units in different ways. So again, obviously low tide, for example, you get cover bonus. Now that stacks with the Sharks +1 to save aura. Now that's super effective turn one with Ishlandard, who are ignore rend. So that's one example of something you're going to do a little differently now. Now, if you do the high tide +1 or +3 command points, depending on if you have an Achillean general, you're going to be making different decisions, and you don't just have all eels to decide. There's going to be trade-offs of different units scale differently in terms of their damage output with those extra attacks. Like the eels still scale the best, but if you want sharks in there for utility, you're going to have to make decisions of, do you run units of 1 shark or units of 2 to 4, where you're getting more utility out of those command points at the sacrifice of kind of being able to spread out and kind of take board control. So definitely just some different ways of looking at we're taking the strengths of our allegiance abilities into account.
Yeah. So I wanted to highlight here, folks, that you haven't lost it. So Broken Realms Morathi, you didn't lose anything in your from your battle tome. Rather, you really gained a lot of stuff here. So if you like playing the way you play, whether it's you reverse the tide already and you like to go alpha in turn 2, whether you're already setting up for turn 3, whether you are looking at some of the retreating or abilities, or you're looking at just different particular play styles, that hasn't changed. You can keep playing the way you want to play. But I do like the new introduction of some of these additional rules that may get you thinking about your list. And when you start adding, let's say, a turtle and your Reavers into play, or the turtles and your thralls, and you start thinking about potentially the low tide number 1, which is around units being treated in cover, and then you think about the combination of your turtle and your thralls, that may change either your list style or even your play style or how you might deploy. So it's something to keep in mind. I just wanted to highlight, not necessarily game breaking, but it may incentivize you to do something else. Cool. So your rules haven't changed here. But the other one that kind of really I got thinking about, Jordan, was that the Gloomtide Shipwreck is something that most Deepkin players, I paint you all with a big brush, because every opponent I've played, when they put their Gloomtide Shipwreck down, they're just blocking up my deployment zone. That's all they want to do. They couldn't care less about the mortal wound on a 6. They couldn't care less about the addition, but all the stuff, right? They couldn't care less about that stuff. All they want to do is annoy me in my deployment zone and make my life difficult. Has that changed, or are you thinking about the Gloomtide in different ways, in addition to annoying the crap out of me?
Yeah, well, being annoyed with it is obviously a huge strength of it, but I do think you will see it positioned a little differently going forward, depending on the list. So one of the lists we'll talk about today, again, utilizes the turtle, some of the defensive eels who get with stacking cover and the +1 to save from the turtle allow you to be very defensible. Now we only have cover turn 1 in the normal order of the tides, so you'd be at 2-up turn 1, but from then on you'd be go to the 3-up with the turtles +1 to save. But positioning the Gloomtides kind of mid-table now actually gives you a spot for you to land your defensive eels, turn 2 or like after movement turn 1 or turn 2, and really stretch out your bubble of kind of your presence of where you're kind of trying to zone out the enemy. Lets you throw them somewhere where they can land in cover, where you're controlling where the cover goes, with the added bonus of the 6-up ward save, and also then being extremely hard to charge if you have eels in the boat. That's again still super annoying, but not necessarily in the deployment zone. You're now potentially going to see some more mid-table used to help keep defenses up throughout the game.
Again, similar to the allegiance abilities, it won't change the way you're currently playing. So it's not like you've got to learn a whole new style and what you've done now is wrong. But certainly, again, start asking questions and So I guess what I'm trying to say here, folks, is don't automatically play the way you've always been playing for the last couple of years. I really do feel like with the new list building, with the new options, with the new mount traits, it has unlocked some different play styles. So I would almost look at this brand new fresh and think about, are there other ways that I could use my terrain piece? Are there other ways that I could blah? So that's some really good points, Jordan, really good points. So we are going to, and by the way, some people in the chat here are very excited to hear about some Deepkin Lumineth. So maybe get your thoughts maybe towards the end of the show, because we do have 2 lists, and maybe there's some allies. No, there's no allies. But what I do want to talk about is maybe find out, is it with the new War Scroll updates, because there has been a couple of War Scroll updates as well. Are there any allies you would take in your Lumineth? So stay tuned for that one. I'll buy you some time to think about what you want to say.
For sure.
So one of the cool things I need to get a scanner properly so I could do this properly, not from my photo. I do apologize here. But one of the cool things as well is you do get a battalion. There's a new battalion, the Blood something. There's a new battalion, the Blood Surf Hunt Battalion, and you also did get some mount traits for your Deep Mare, as well as mount traits with your Leviathan. So how does this all work? And did you have any ones? Do you think they're all good, or do you think that maybe some are just clearly better than the others?
Yeah, I definitely think there are some that are clear standouts. Maybe for each of the mounts, you have one amazing one good one, and then one you just kind of forget about. So looking at the Deep Mare, obviously the first one, on a 6, on the charge, you do D6 mortal wounds instead of the normal D3, which is on a 2-up. For the amount that's going to happen, and then a D6 being super unreliable anyways, that's barely worth considering. It's cute if you want to take it, or if you want to roll random in a with your buddies, but competitively, I don't think it's going to add anything interesting.
Yeah, there was for me, like when I looked at this, actually it's quite funny because the way I'm running my Sons of Behemoth army, my Mega Gargant, my boss, actually has the exact same combination as my the Deep Mare and the Leviathan trait. So yeah, it's funny because my Kraken Eater does have a -1 hit bubble, actually a bubble, and then the artifact I've got is Plate of Perfect Protection, which causes ignores me. It doesn't change it. It just ignores range 1. So it's basically the same combination, which I thought was brilliant that they brought that in a very different way. But for me, when I looked at Ancient for turtles, like that was money. That was just straight money. I don't know what you think about the Leviathan, but I was like, yeah, that is just 24 karat gold. Give me ancient turtles.
So I actually think, looking at the Leviathan, ancient is great, especially if you're throwing him into combat. But I actually like reverberating carapace, the third one, the most. It's going to give you a bigger aura, which is huge, going an extra 3 inches out either side. Lets you spread your bubble and kind of its range of influence potentially over fully covering 2 objectives, which with defensive or eels or offensive or thralls or anything, just a bigger bubble there is huge. Also, thinking that your Leviathan for probably the first half of the game or first couple turns, it's going to be kind of sitting in the middle of your army where you have stuff out front like your defensive eels who are taking the hit, stuff in behind, potentially screening out your backfield so no one deep strikes in behind you. But so that rend is, or ignoring the one rend is great by all means, but isn't necessarily going to come into play until you decide to throw the turtle into combat. Again, never hurts to have the ignore one rend. But the reverberating carapace to me gives just a little more utility in terms of movement and positioning with the rest of your army, where you can still take kind of more advantage of the buff that he provides, which is huge. Obviously, the +1 to save as well as the +1 hit for your Namardi.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think, you've raised some really interesting points on the way that you play your turtle. Most people play their turtle as a support piece behind a line of something, whether it's Reavers, whether it's Thralls, whether it's just something, right? But you could put it actually in front and using the rules of, you've got to shoot the closest unit. This turtle could actually just be out the front, soaking up all the shooting damage. It could be a monster hunter. The fact that it does when it hits on a 6 with its bite attack, it does six mortal wounds, which is just an absolute monster killer.
So they changed that. It's now it's a 6 to hit does 3 mortal wounds, but they split it from 1 attack with the turtle to 2 attacks. So 2 that do 3 or D3 each. So it ends up roughly about the same, but actually makes it a lot more reliable.
But against the monster keyword, it does 6.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's what I'm saying. It's like it's the monster hunter, right? So you could go out to the Terror Guys, you could go out to the Stonehorn and just fish for those 6s, and boom, 6 mortal wounds is brutal. So you could play, you can play it as just soaks up the damage. It could be a monster hunter. It could be the buff piece. I think again, it gives you versatility the way you use your turtle. So again, big win for me. It's not just, one list rules them all, which is kind of where it was going to one point. It was just like season for taste. Do you have offensive or defensive eels? Like same, but different. But we will obviously talk about some of these rules as well in context of your lists, which would be interesting to hear how you're kind of thinking about it. Again, it doesn't kind of invalidate the current list builds, but hey, think about this as some different options or get some new toys out on the table. And we did get, like I mentioned, a War Scroll update for the Leviathan. We got them for both of the Eidolons, which was really cool, as well as the Alapex. So some things of reconsidering your lists. And any of those, before I get into your list, were any of those changes, those War Scroll changes, whether it was the Alapex, the Eidolons, or the Leviathans, did any of those impress you, or some of them maybe disappoint you? Where were your thoughts on those 4 War Scroll updates?
I would say I still am not really looking at the Eidolon of the Sea very much, just with how much strong magic casting. Now, he's reliable in terms of getting to reroll casts, but not still dominant compared to other factions out there. And we're really not built as a magic heavy army, so you get more bang for your buck out of the other 3. And the other 3 War Scroll changes I love. Super happy to be able to play my Eidolon, get him on the table, and actually having a big impact, which is a lot of fun.
Look, and I'll be brutally honest, I was disappointed that Lotan didn't get a War Scroll update. As cool as Lockie is, the little squid, isn't quite there yet to be put on the table. So, sorry.
I would have also loved to see a little buff or maybe some synergy for the the Marty Reavers. Now they get the +1 hit from the turtle. They get the +1 to wound from the Eidolon, both their buffs. So that will help them a little bit, but I still think they're a step behind everything else.
Yeah.
Maybe if their shooting had a rend, or they didn't have to be within 9 inches or super close to really get the maximum shooting output out. That's obviously really tough to do, and they're quite paper thin. So
let's take the wins while we got them.
Yeah.
I think overall you won a lot of stuff. You didn't lose anything.
Exactly.
I don't think you lost anything, actually. There's like there was a couple of changes, and obviously some points went up, but this is basically like hitting the jackpot.
Yep.
So the first list that we're going to go through, so the two lists that you've given us, the first list is Futhon.
Mm-hmm.
I always mess up the names for Deepkin. I miss all the names. Someone's going to actually me. So again, I think a lot of people will know the Futhon rules, but maybe with my Broken Realms Morathi hat, how are you thinking about these particular rules? Is any of them more important than others? Or should we just discuss this with the list? How are you thinking about your sub-allegiance and maybe why you chose this?
Yeah, I think you always saw two sub-factions, which are Futhon and Domhain being the most dominant one. I don't think that really changes. You still might see the odd person taking one of the other sub-factions with a Gotrek in it so he can run and charge for some fun. But other than that, these are still the two you're going to see. And again, like you said, there's no changes to them. It's just the units are going to interact a little differently. There's different benefits, obviously, and it's really just, the synergies between the updated models and different models you're going to see on the table now, that you'll see things play out a little differently on the table.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. So good to know. Again, no big changes with the sub-allegiance, but we'll talk a little bit about how you're now building the Broken Realms Morathi Deepkin build. Yeah. So for the podcast friends, I'll read out the list, and then I'd love some of your logic on why you've gone down this route. So first one is Futhon. We have the Tidecaster, the Isharan Tidecaster, who's the general, which is born from Agony, and the Steed of Tides. Which is the new ignore that. We've got the Soul Scryer, we've got a Eidolon of Mathland, the aspect of the storm. I agree with you, by the way, the sea isn't quite there yet. I don't really know how we make the sea better. I don't think, as you said, it's going to be a supercaster, a techless, a lot of change, a croak. At the same time, it is a big point sink for basically like my free guild battle mage on a griffin. It's like, you're cool, but I'm just better off taking the leader, the general, as opposed to the wizard on the griffin.
Yeah, totally.
That's how I feel. We've got 10 thralls, 10 thralls, 10 thralls, 6 Morsar Guard. My last game literally the other day was against Mortec. So we've got 6 Morsar Guard, 3 Morsar Guard, 3 Morsar Guard, 3 Ishalan Guard, 3 Ishalan Guard, and Alapex, turtles. And you've got the net launcher on there, and that comes in at 1990 with 132 wounds. So very traditional. It's not basically the internet list, which is basically all the eels. And we do have a little bit of variety here, but we still have a core of what people have been running. So take me through maybe your leader choices, or take me through the list and how it's all working and why you chose what you chose.
Yeah, so from a general sense, obviously when you go Futhon, the big thing is you get to flip the tides. So you get run and charge turn 1, attack first at the start of the phase. And like you said, this list, and it still has 12 Morsar eels, so still 12 offensive, which is quite a bit. And this is what I think is going to be maybe a good example of lists that you'll see in this transitional phase while people get their Eidolon, Turtle, and other models painted up. This is like, if someone has an Eidolon, they'll throw it in right away, and this is a good example of what you might see. Now, obviously, you don't have the Achillean King as your general because the Tidecaster has to be your general to do this, so you have no Achillean general or hero in here at all. So you have the Tidecaster again allowing you to flip the tides, and you have to have the 3 units of thralls in here for your battle line. Now, you do have the offensive eels, you have defensive, and then the Shark, and Eidolon, they all provide a little bit of utility in different ways. Now, being able to flip the tides, this is more of an aggressive style of Deepkin where you are looking to get in, fast and early. And while that's not necessarily how I like to play them, I think sometimes when you look at armies like Seraphon and Lumineth so prevalent that just do AoE mortal wounds, I find now with Deepkin, you just have to get in there fast against those armies. Otherwise, you just get, punished so quickly. And you just can't survive because, they're just going to mortal wound everything to death. So in here, again, we have 30 thralls, but the big thing I think to talk about at the first is the 2 Ishlayan Guard. Like you said, they're great. Like you were saying with the turtle, they're great at soaking up enemy fire, whether it's Seraphon shooting or anyone shooting really. Obviously, in conjunction with our allegiance ability, where you have to shoot the closest Idoneth unit, having something that could potentially be in cover and ignores rend is great for soaking up shooting. And if they're taking mortal wounds, they'll still die as quick as any other eels, but it's cheaper, saving points rather than having Morsar screen. And they're great for tying up units that you don't want to deal with. You can throw them in, tag the edges of some stuff, and just use them to tie up opposing units. In conjunction with the Alopex. Now, I think you'll see more Alopexes than just one, but at times, and we'll talk about that in the next list, actually. But the Alopex in this list has the net launcher. So the net launcher, if it hits, which is on a 3-up, allows, or it restricts the unit that it hits from making a pile-in move during your turn. So that's big. Just in conjunction with something like the Ishlayan Guard, if you get that shot off, you pile in, tag the edge of a unit, and you tag another big unit or something, you're going to be able to say tie up a unit of Hearthguard Berserkers with 3 with 3 defensive eels. Only 1 or 2 are necessarily hitting you back if you go in an ideal position because you've restricted their pile in. So then on their turn, maybe before a double turn or a potential double turn or priority roll or whatnot, you're tying that unit up at the start of their turn, so they're stuck in combat already. They're not moving, they're not charging, they're not getting into your Morsar or the other kind of meat of your army. So obviously the Shark with the net launcher can be very interesting. Now,
it might be worth pointing out as well here, just to pause for a second in case people might have missed this. So first off, with the Alopex, it's when you hit. It's not when you damage. So even if you fail your wound, if you fail, you don't do any damage with the net launcher. As long as one of your 4 attacks, which hits on a 3, as long as one of those statistics,
just one for the net.
Yeah, it's only one for the net. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the launcher. Yeah. So if you hit on a 3, if you can hit, doesn't matter if you wound, doesn't matter if you do damage, you've stopped the pile-in. So it's pretty generous. Like you've got a 66% chance statistically that they're not going to pile in. Yeah. And the reason as well, just to go back really quickly to the Ishlayan Guard, the reason why they're good defensively is because they ignore rend. So having a 4-up save, ignoring rend, you're basically Nighthaunt. So it just means, especially like I just played at a tournament recently, and some of the issues that I had, the only 2 games that I lost were against shooting armies with character overlords and Cities of Sigmar with their Iron Drakes doing like so much damage with rend -2. You just go lol yep. to your rend. You obviously still take the damage, but a 4-up as opposed to a 6-up is a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. And they get +1 to save on the charge. So they're great, kind of like you were saying with the turtle, throwing them up into something. They're aggressively defensive where you can tie up opposing units and kind of restrict movement by just getting into them and, taking a turn or 2 for them to kill you off.
They are sexy. Sorry, I just wanted to, just in case anyone who's picking this up for the first time and they don't quite know when we're talking about why defensive eels are really good, why, or that some people might just assume that you've got to do damage because often some abilities are triggered off damage. But no, the Alopex net launcher is based on a hit roll. So I'll let you get back into explaining your list, but I just wanted to pause in that moment to make sure everyone got that piece of gold.
Yeah, that's great. Otherwise, so again, this is an aggressive, kind of build, you're going to have your whole army running and charging turn 1, so you can move up, get some defenses up, or throw a Schley in to tie stuff up, hit other things with your Morsar Guard, as well as moving your thralls to the middle of the table, potentially, depending on who went first, getting charges off with them as well. The Soul Scryer, again, a staple in Deepkin lists. You're going to be able to deep strike 2 units with him. He also gives +3 to charge, so you're going to be coming off the board edges with needing a 6-up charges. And your eels natively have the rerolls, which is obviously everyone knows what that does. So that's all pretty much standard stuff for Futhon. But the inclusion of the Eidolon is a great one. Now, I ran a very similar list to this last year as my competitive list, running an Incalian King instead of the Eidolon, though. But the Incalian King, you lose the value because you don't get the use out of his command point. So it's not great, but again, he's still great with the Cloud of Midnight. But it's so much better on the Eidolon. So the Eidolon, with some of the changes now, he's super tanky. He has a 5-up ward save, which is incredible. He heals D3 wounds on the charge, which he had before, but that's still, makes him very resilient. He's 12 wounds on a 3-up save, and he's not a monster. So he doesn't bracket.
Dropped 50 points. Obviously, again, Winter FAQ may change us, but he also dropped in points, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So he had been at 360. Yeah. So dropped 30 points from the last book FAQ or the last kind of points drop. But yeah. So it came down 30 points. You get way more utility out of him. Now he's the same cost as 6 Morsar Guard or Leviathan. So those 3 kind of unit options, you're going to see interchanged a lot. The great thing that the Eidolon adds is he buffs everything else in an 18-inch bubble with +1 to wound, which, for an army that hits on 3s and 3s and is often re-rolling 1s to hit, the +1 to wound just adds a huge kind of buff to reliability, though his damage drops off compared to like 6 eels. They're going to do double the damage, but he buffs everything, not just himself. So that's, kind of, you're sacrificing the one spot damage, but spreading out to all the other units doing more damage.
The reroll the reroll wound rolls of 1 from the Drench of Hate is just buffing a wound roll is just so hard in this game. That's why things like the Frost Phoenix, when they're in and they do a negative to wound rolls, is a huge difference because it's just so hard. But getting the Drench of Hate, I really like. And I think one of the other rewards, Jordan, is that with the new battle plans in General's Handbook 2020, there are a whole bunch of ones where you're going to score additional victory points with a leader involved, or you burn with the additional victory points. And I noticed when I play Deepkin, you rarely have many heroes up in my line. It's usually maybe 1, but usually your Tidecast is sitting at the back. You're very hero light to begin with. So I feel like you've been giving up a lot of victory points in the new edition without those support heroes. And I think this tanky hero can do it on his own and create a different threat in some of those scenarios. So I do like the inclusion of the aspect of the Storm in conjunction with the new General's Handbook battle plans.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you said, Total Conquest is a big one for extra points for heroes. So you're potentially getting 3 extra points now, where previously, like you said, you only ever saw 2 heroes with Deepkin. So this gives us now a fast, aggressive, tanky hero, especially in conjunction with his item, which is the Cloud of Midnight. So this is the kind of a common item that you see from Deepkin, but it's amazing with him because once per phase, at the beginning of any phase, he will become untargetable. So if he's the only thing you're in combat with, you can't attack at all when you activate. If he's the closest thing when your army is going to shoot, they all have to target him, but cannot target him, therefore just can't shoot. So in this list, thinking like turn 1, even if you can't get close enough to get into combat with your army, you can throw him forward, at the front of your army, in front of everything. All the enemy shooting has to target him. He pops his Cloud of Midnight, and you just basically nullify a full round of shooting, which against an army like Lumineth, which can be a struggle for Deepkin, shutting down their shooting for 1 turn before your before your next turn of really engaging them and getting into combat, can be huge. So that's a strong item that worked with the Eidolon of the Storm. I think is just kind of a great combination.
A couple of quick questions before we move on to the second list, because I think for me the second list is the sexier one. No offense to this first list.
Yep.
It's for me, it's just obviously like eels. We got a different variety of eels, but we still got a lot of eels.
Yep.
Why 6? Because I guess the question that people would be having is, let's say you're Morsar Guard. Why 6 as opposed to lots more of 3s? Why not a larger unit? Why the combination of Morsar? And then I will ask you about thralls. So talk to me about the eels and your choice selection. Why 6? Why the kit out that you've done?
Yeah, so obviously in this list you have the potential to flip the tides, and if you do on turn 2, the turn you're attacking first, you get to attack with everything first. So the unit size doesn't matter as much there. But that's only one turn. So the other 4 turns, 3 eels by themselves won't often, significantly, hurt a strong unit that's resilient and, is going to hit you back hard. So I think it's important to have at least one unit of 6 in your list, just for something that can, outside of the, high tide, can hit and cripple a unit before it gets to attack first. So Hearthguard Berserkers or whatever, getting into rotating on Terror Dice or something, 3 eels aren't going to cripple it, and then if it attacks and kills the other 3 eels that are in combat with it, you weren't getting effective use out of them. So getting to activate 6 before your opponent is huge, and really 4 out of 5 of the turns you're not attacking first, so you need to be able to reliably kill stuff before it hits you back. Because as soon as you start getting hit by enemies with Deepkin, your army's going to crumble, because obviously Deepkin are kind of your prototypical glass cannon where they're not the most resilient.
No, and whenever I've played against Deepkin, they're so reliant on a big mortal wound zap. You do the zap on the charge or at the start of combat. I can't remember the exact sequence.
At start of combat.
Yes, so you do all your zaps, and it doesn't matter. It just that unit of 6 is going to do a whole bunch of zaps and a whole bunch of mortal wounds. But then once those zaps are out, if you haven't done significant damage to your opponent, I've personally found the Ishlan and the Morsar just hit like a wet paper towel. It's just like you don't do a lot. It's the mortal wounds that you're really swinging for the fence for. So having that big block of 6 is potentially, because obviously depends on the dice roll, potentially a lot of damage. So I do like that big block. It is a big point sink, but and it will be a target where people want to get rid of that big block.
Yeah.
But I think that's why you've also got your units of 3 as well, so you can kind of scatter around the board.
Exactly.
You've got speed. Correct me if I'm wrong, the Alapex also increased its movement.
Yes.
Which I thought was really sweet.
So it went from 12 to 14. Yeah, so that's a big boost to the shark. Getting to zip around, he can hold back objectives and shoot from range, or he can fight your minimum battle line units and take them out over a turn or 2. So he's pretty, even just one shark on their own are pretty scary.
Well, I just played. I just mentioned I played at a tournament last weekend. A lot of the scenarios that were picked on the day had a difference of 18 inches between us, our deployment zones. So if my opponent sits on the line, I put my shark on the line, it means that there's a 4-inch charge.
Yep.
Like that's, it doesn't mean I need to spend a command point. The likelihood to fail is slim. Then I obviously bring in the new net ability, let alone the eels and all that stuff. So I think that additional 2 inches, people are paying 80 points for cogs just to get that +2 to move. So I think that's a very generous. Don't overlook that Alapex change.
Yeah, that's a big one. Now, I'm a little sad because while the Alapex gained 2 inches, the Leviathan lost 2 inches, which unfortunately hurts a little bit for him, but obviously still a great and useful piece in any army.
Yeah. The other question I had to you before we move into the other list, which is probably like, I've just gone out and I told my parents, I told my girlfriend, I've told my wife, I want some Deepkin. She's like, you can only get a little bit extra. You spent too much this year already on Warhammer. So I picked myself up a Shark and maybe an Eidolon. And then we'll go into the maybe the birthday or the Christmas after list where you've upgraded it even more. But the other question I had for you was with the thralls. Now most Deepkin players who are taking like the Achillean King aren't usually taking thralls. This is a tax in your army at the moment because you've got to have battle line and you're not taking your Achillean King. Are your thralls just tax, or are you thinking about them with their additional damage potential, or how are you thinking about your thralls in addition to having to take them because they're battle line?
Yeah, you obviously have to take them here, like you said, but they are great. They add a ton of kind of versatility, huge footprint, 30 bodies in 3 units of 10 that can spread out. They can zone out your backfield objectives. You can have them in the front line to be a screen to receive enemy charges. And generally, especially, everybody knows about the eels. They're often not the first target to be hit. So nobody goes after the thralls first, which means they can often sneak up, be in the second wave, and do, have a devastating impact on their own. Now they get, they have 1 rend, 1 damage to, 2 attacks to each base. They get an extra attack against 1 wound models, which is, incredible for, horde clearing, or, killing 1 wound models, as well as they go from 1 damage to 2 damage if it's a unit with 4 or more wound models. So that just makes them incredibly, strong in terms of their damage output, especially in conjunction with the Eidolons +1 to wound. Now, playing with these new rules, I've had maybe 2 games where I've had 10 thralls take out an ironclad by themselves, or take it down to 2 wounds or something. And that's 10 thralls, just walking up after, the ironclad's been shooting off everything else, and 10 thralls walk up, take it out. They're also wrapping the boat, so anything inside just gets slain because they have no room to land. So great as kind of your sneaky second wave of walking up. They're great as a screen just to take the enemy's hit if you need something to. Obviously, you have the Ishland to do that as well. But they're also a backfield screen of kind of zoning out your own objectives. Making sure when the Stinks and Salamanders teleport behind you, they're not landing on objectives, and if they do teleport, they're at least just hitting thralls, and then you can still backtrack with either your Morsar or other things just to take out those threats afterwards. So it allows you to have kind of a big bubble of zoning and board control and a few more bodies. That it's again just makes the whole army more versatile, not going all in on just kind of one type of unit.
I think the cool thing as well with thralls is that you don't have to buff them. So if you want to leave them on a backfield objective, they do 2 attacks each. They hit on 3s, wound on 3s, rend 1 for 1 damage. Obviously, Jordan just talked about, if you're a wound 1 or if you're more than 4 wounds, the additional benefits. But you could comfortably sit them on a backfield objective. And for most deep striking things, whether it's Canary, Skinks, there's a lot of deep striking, Shadow Warriors, whatever it is, they could probably take the punch. Mind you, they've only got a 5-up armor save. And they do only have 1 wound, and they are on a 32 mil base, so they're not invincible. But they can sit on a home objective quite well. That's probably one of the challenges that Deepkin in the old build, you put everything in your deep striking eels and very little on the table. And if that doesn't go to play, or if I'm a 1-drop Iron Jaws, Iron Suns, or some type of Ogre Maw tribes, and I just charge you turn 1, straight up, you don't have a lot of counter to that. So I think the thralls come into play here and can be a screen for those types of opponents as well.
For sure.
So cool. Anything else you'd want to add from this particular list before we move into the other one?
No, again, I think it's pretty traditional, like you said. Just some of these, other units add extra utility, again, with the net being big, and then the Eidolon having that big tanky hero who's going to be able to fight for objectives on his own, who's also an amazing hero slayer to take out the, he gets +1 +1 to hit against heroes that are less than 8 wounds or 8 or less. So gives you kind of hero slaying threat. He's a great one to go after Croak. So that's a lot of fun.
Good luck getting Croak. But I think the combination with the aspect of the storm with Cloud of Midnight and your tides is going to ask some interesting questions. I think people are going to quite understand. Like people, like my opponent I was talking about with the Iron Drakes, he had the choice of just point click. He was just like, cool, I want to kill this Kraken Eater, like buffed up, Ren -2, just shoot dead. But if I force the challenge and go, well, no, actually, because of Cloud of Midnight and just the way things work, I think a lot of shooting armies are going to go, wait a second, that's not who I want to shoot. Wait a second, I've invested so many points between Iron Drakes, Sorceress, Bridge, Warding King, Rune Lord. Like, it's a lot of points investment. You're like, nope, sorry, can't shoot me.
Yep.
Good work, 330-point legend.
Oh, for sure.
So second list we've got is a Dom Hain one. This was actually just accidentally, we did originally have it as Futhan, but it was a mistake, and I didn't have time to actually bring up the rules for Dom Hain. But maybe I'll ask you just really quickly before we go into the list. With Dom Hain, has the rules changed? Has the way you think about the Dom Hain sub-allegiance been altered in any way with Broken Realms, or is this just better because of why?
Yeah, the same as it was before the Broken Realms. No real changes, and you're not really looking at the sub factions much differently. Again, you're going Futhan if you want to flip the tides to be super aggressive. You're going Dom Hain, which I think is slightly better for the rerolls on the charges. Reroll all wounds against monsters, and there's a lot of monsters in the meta now, or a good amount at least. So I think that's still kind of your front runner there. So no real significant differences with either of those.
Cool. Yeah, no, just in case any of these rules have made something more better, or because of the combination that you're picking, it may have incentivized you in other builds. So good to know. Again, the re-rolling is important, which is why I guess in this particular build we've gone Dom Hain as opposed to Futhan or any of the other. I can't even remember the other ones' names. That's how little I see them on the table. You could Little Mermaid allegiance and Ninja Turtle allegiance. So you've gone Dom Hain, and again, for our podcast friends, I'll read out the list. We've got our Achillean King, who is the general. Command trait is the Lord of Storm and Sea, with the bladed polearm. The artifact is the armor of. You introduced that name. Saitai.
I don't know.
Mai Tai, Saitai, and we have the Void Shield Darkness, which is the new mount trait that's come from Broken Realms. We've got the Ishlan Soul Scryer with the something I can't squint that much. Last Laminate, the artifact. We do have 6 Morsar Guard. We have 3 Ishlan Guard, 3 Ishlan Guard, 3 Ishlan Guards. We do have more eels. So we have eels, but not as many eels. And those points have been invested into 2 Alapexes, 2 Alapexes, and my personal favorite, a Leviathan with the Carapace. So we haven't gone ancient like I was talking up, but you've gone the Carapace, and obviously you've mentioned you're a fan. Before you talk about the list, does your turtle have a name, and have you been inspired by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at all?
I haven't. I only have 1 turtle, not 4, and he does not have a name. So maybe we'll leave it up to the YouTube community to see if they can come up with some good name ideas.
All right, I know. Rocco in my Discord is obsessed. He's got Shelly the turtle and Bruce, I think, is the shark. I can't remember who Bruce is, but he's come up with some weird names. But we've got to get that turtle a name. But let's start up at the top. So you've got your Achillean King. Why the loadout? Why are we taking that Void Shield Darkness? Why is that? Talk me through some of your leader combinations first.
Yeah, so actually, one thing to say is I actually have the Battalion Italian Corps in this list also.
Oh, that's right. If I scroll down slightly a little bit more, I thought I'd be smart to try to get it all on a single page. Yes, you do have
made it difficult for you. Yeah.
Yeah, good work, Anthony. All right, so Killian Corp is in there as well, guys.
So big thing with this puts Deepkin to a 3-drop army, which is a great spot to be. You're going to have choice most of the time. Again, that's really great for Deepkin being able to give it away. This list, just from kind of an overall perspective, is all about control. Whereas typical Deepkin and even the previous list was more about damage output and taking out the opponent's threats. This list is more about just controlling where what can get into your units, how much damage they're doing, pile-ins, and kind of all that stuff, depending on if you go with the nets or the harpoons on the alopexes. So again, a lot of control, a lot of limiting your opponent's output, and some interesting things there. So looking at the Achillean King, again, here you could go with some of the traditional items, like Cloud of Midnight is still good. The +2 wounds general trait is still great. But wanted to look at some other ones that are great options and potentially opened up a little more with the recent changes. So the Achillean King, being your general, he still is going to have the command ability to add 1 extra attack to a unit for a command point. And you have the 1 unit of Morsar Guard where you have 6. That's probably the unit you're going to be looking at adding those on if you need to.
That command ability hasn't changed yet, so it's still as written. Drives me insane, but it can be stacked.
Yes. Yeah.
So I had one of my opponents who's my club mate, and I'm going to call him out here because he's a jerk, but 6 command points in a single turn, stacking that rule, and I just wanted to kick him in the crotch.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone talks about it so much, but maybe it's like I've never. So I've said this before, but realistically, that command ability comes into play for me maybe 1 out of 3 or 5 games. It's only 1 turn, and it's only if you get the positioning that you and your opponent know. Like you said, that where that's coming from a mile off. You see your opponent, you know what they're doing. So if you're able to position to mitigate it, you will. So that's where
I think for me, it's just that most command stacking has been removed from the game. There is very few units that can now command stack, and if you are going to do it twice, it has to be on another unit. I think for me, it was more like, let's just like straight out blanket clean up those rules. But right now, as it stands, you can still stack it, I guess, is just my call out here.
And I think that would be a great change, personally, as a Deepkin player. Again, maybe that's me because I don't find I use the command ability a ton. And if I do, I really only need to add 1 attack to 1 unit, because if you're adding the attack to 6 eels, the output there is going to pretty much wipe anything that you go into to begin with, especially because you're attacking first that round. So anything else you have going into a target will also be attacking first. So I would love to see that limited also to 1 and not be able to sack as well. It will also make everyone a little happier to play against Deepkin.
So you got your Achillean King. Your Achillean King is clearly there to buff up and support your Morsar Guard, probably, especially. I mean, obviously he supports the Ishlan as well, but usually they come in a nice little combination. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. Now, again, I used to run the Cloud of Midnight on my Achillean King, so I actually used him more often than not to tie up units rather than use his command points. I can't tell you how many times I've thrown him right in front of a lane blocking Hearthguard Berserkers, so that on his turn, my opponent has to go into the King. I tie him up with Cloud of Midnight, and there's potentially 2 turns I've tied up a unit of 20 Hearthguard Berserkers in kind of in the backfield or limited where they can move, just from the King. So I'm willing to sacrifice him, and that's kind of how I'd always play him. So this, rather than the Cloud of Midnight, this is doing a couple other things. So first of all, the command trait, Lord of Storm and Sea, is a wholly within 12 aura of +2 bravery. That comes into play, I think, more so now with armies like Lumineth on the table, where they can really mess with your bravery. So looking at this army, it probably wants to play in a big bubble where you have your Leviathan and your Achillean King in the center, Ishlan on the outskirts, kind of taking the hits and controlling where shooting is going, as well as what your opponent gets to charge. with your Alopexes, your 2 units of 2 shooting from the center with your turtle, and then you have the Morsar to jump out and strike when you need them to. So thinking about kind of that big bubble, the +2 to bravery trait is huge, again, against someone like Lumineth, who can do AoE mortal wounds to your whole army, and then -2 to bravery. So you'd be on -3 bravery if you lost 1 eel to each of your 4 eel units, which is just crippling. So wanting to play a little bit more control where you're not necessarily engaging and attacking as much, that'll help you kind of maybe survive more against Lumineth and armies like that can mess with bravery, if you're seeing that kind of in your local meta. Then the artifact and the command trait here both basically do the same thing. The mount trait. The mount trait is obviously Void Chill Darkness here, which is the -1 to hit for any models within 3 inches of the Italian King. So only affects stuff in combat with it, not from shooting. But the artifact in conjunction is anything attacking it in combat is an additional -1 to hit. So your Italian King here is, again, great for tying up units, going off on his own and dealing with just like, pesky 10 model battle line units that are holding objectives or stuff like that, without really being at risk of taking any damage back, even if you don't attack first, because whatever is attacking is going to be at -2 to hit him. So, he's on a 3-up save, +1 with the turtle if he's nearby. So on a 2-up with -2 to hit, it's going to be hard for anyone to remove him in combat.
So just to remember that, and this is something that I've got to remember as well as a Gargant player, is that Void Chill Darkness is a 3-inch bubble. So if someone shoots out of combat, then the -1 doesn't come into play. But the other rule as well that sometimes people forget is that it's a 3-inch bubble, not a -1 to hit me. So if I had, let's say, the Achillean King and some eels in combat, and I had an eel within the 3-inch bubble as well, and even though they weren't attacking the Achillean King, they were attacking the eel, they would be -1 to hit as well. So the bubble is a nice little benefit. So play that. I've been playing that a lot, having my Mega Gargant and a Man Crusher, and making my life a little bit harder within that 3 inches. And at least with an eel, like a Mega Gargant on like that massive plate, that's a big 3-inch bubble. But I think same thing. Think about it as a bubble as opposed to what we used to have with the Griffeather Charm.
Yeah, and exactly. And then in combination with the armor of the Sithite. Now, this is an item that's been in the Deepkin book for so long, but it was often overlooked by the Cloud of Midnight. But now that you can stack it with another, the mount trait, just -2 to hit, you can throw that all day into stuff, especially on a 2-up save. Give it re-rolling 1s to save, and he can tie up a lot of stuff for a couple rounds if the turtle's nearby, also helping out with his aura.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. So the armor is giving us a -1 to hit, and that's melee weapon. So again, doesn't impact shooting. So in a shooting meta, but luckily your tides can help you with the shooting. But in combat, you are essentially going to be -2 to hit with -2 to hit the Achillean King. So I've run Troggoth Hags in the past, and she is normally -2, sometimes even -3. I've even gotten it to -4 at one stage. -2 is no joke. It's very, very, very hard to do damage with -2. So again, not invincible, but know that it'll be very hard. And people will just give up trying to target him. They'll just go for other things.
Yep. And that's great, right? This whole list is about, again, controlling. You're not necessarily dishing out as much damage as some traditional Deepkin lists, but you're tied up your opponent. You're getting them stuck off of objectives, ideally, with your speed. You're tying them up in their own zones. You're tagging the edge of 1 unit and another one from outside, the edge of 3, so that they're not, potentially piling in if you go with the nets on the Alopexes here. But I think the harpoons are great too. Now, talking about those, you have 24 shots in this list if you go with the harpoons on 3s and 3s. Now, with reroll 1s to hit from the Achillean King or, from the Achillean King's aura. So with 1 rend, 1 damage. So 24 shots at 24-inch range, that's some significant output. Even if you're going into something like, small heroes, it's great for taking out, Hag Queens or Fireslayer heroes that are at the back of units that you can't get to from charging or combat, and it lets you kind of deal with some of those annoying little heroes before you go into combat. Same thing for like stink priests or the little stink heroes that are giving the 18-inch aura for parting shot for the stink units, getting to kill those little heroes before you charge. That's huge.
Yeah, I was just looking at, I know, again, I talked about Ben Spinetti in the past, who's been on the show many times. I know one of his favorite little combinations has been using the harpoon launcher, getting in, doing some damage, and then combining that with the bloodthirsty predator rule. So, trying to do some damage so that when you get into combat, you're getting that +1 to attack characteristic, because basically, like a shark, it's got blood in the water, and because you've done some wounds, you then get a whole bunch of additional attacks in combat. So, and they are brutal in combat. I think they've still got eight wounds apiece, 4 up armor save. They are very combat-driven monsters, and the fact that you could run them as 4 separate ones, you could have 4 different ones, and they're okay. But if you run them as packs of 2, obviously a command ability goes a little bit further. You take a little bit more board space, and in addition, should you lose a shark with a bravery of 6, it's very unlikely that you're going to lose one. Very unlikely.
Especially with the command trait from the king here in this list, being the +2 if they're within that bubble. Just again, you're not even rolling at that point. And
if in worst case scenario, you've also got your artifact, which is the last laminate as well, making your army immune to battle shock within 18 once per battle. So if things aren't looking good, I don't know that, I can't remember the turn sequence on when you activate it, but if that's something you're concerned about, you could always drop the artifact and make your army immune to battle shock.
Yep, yeah, and that's once per game, wholly within 18 on the Soul Scryer. A great artifact for, like you said, immune to battle shock once per game. So great one. If you do have, again, you might not take both of these with the command trait at the same time, but just wanted to highlight both the item and the command trait because they're both good options. Looking at different lists, and again, Deepkin, there's so much options you're going to have now, and I think there's more depth than people typically played or typically saw. So just try to highlight some of the cool new things or cool different options we have.
No, it's great, and I think as well, like, why I'm really excited about losing Malign Sorcery, because it's probably 12 artifacts that you could name were going to be there, and the other 40 odd artifacts were never there. And artifacts like that, I've never seen the rules for the last laminate until kind of you sent me that list. And I think as we're kind of re-looking at our books, we're going, oh, it's actually now this is actually quite a strong artifact. Before, when I'd Sword Judgment and Griffeather Charm and Thermalrider Cloak, and like they were just too good.
Yep.
So you've got we've talked about your eels already. Do they serve a similar role to the last one? Obviously, they don't do nearly as much damage, or you don't have the offensive aggressive power that your first list has, your Futhan list. But they probably play a similar role. They do similar things. It's just that the way you use them is a little different.
Yeah. So, like you said, very similar in terms of they're your front line. They're what you want your opponent to be shooting at, especially now where they're getting, cover turn 1 and the +1 to save, and then turn 2 again. If you put your boats mid-table, it allows you to drop those Ishland Dart in the middle of the board, still have cover in round 2 for any opponent shooting or charging, and then beyond that 2-up unrendable is just incredible, and you'd have to choose where your boats are to some degree. So those are great. You're using them also to kind of control the opponent. So part of the thing with Deepkin is you can't, besides one turn, you can't hit multiple units at the same time, because if you do, whichever unit you don't attack with first is getting hit first and is likely dying. So the defensive eels, going with more of them, allows you to get in to different threats. You're tying up some big threats and allowing your Morsar Guard and potentially your Alapexes to take out one threat a turn, while your Ishland Guard tie up the other threats.
Do you see a world where you might swap one of your Alapex units to have the nets? So have like maybe one unit of nets, one unit of harpoons, or
Totally. Yeah.
what made you choose double harpoons as opposed to either having all nets or two with nets, two with harpoons?
I think it's just looking at options, and I think for me, when I first saw the nets, I wasn't that impressed compared to, I think, the community reaction, because I don't foresee, being able to already use Cloud of Midnight, already have defensive eels to tie stuff up. I felt like I can already tie up units pretty well when I want to, and the nets are great, but maybe it's overkill for what I need to tie up units how I've needed to. I still think they're good for sure, and especially in kind of a more defensive build where you can really tie stuff up with just 3 defensive eels. So I think there's definitely a good potential, but I think there's also a lot to say about just the offensive output of the shooting of the harpoons. 8 shots per unit. So for 2 sharks is, again, 24 shots in the army at 3s and 3s, 1 rend, 1 damage. You're getting to chew through stuff. You're taking out screens before you charge. You're taking out small heroes that are buffing and adding synergy to the opponent. It's huge, and also softening up targets, allowing your Alapexes to go in and get the extra attacks for blood in the water and all that kind of stuff.
And that's the big thing, right? Because if you go with the nets, it's only 1 attack. So at most, you're getting 2 attacks. And to get that activated Bloodthirsty Predator, you've got to do damage. Mm-hmm. So if you don't do damage, and with 2 attacks, let's say 50% chance, just statistically, actually, 66, probably 2 go through, maybe 1 wounds. It's no rend. So if you don't do the damage, you've really lost out on Bloodthirsty Predator. So at least with the harpoon, you've got consistency that you will get some damage, which means you're going to get the extra pluses to attack. So I like that.
And in between the turtles +1 to save, potentially being in cover, as well as the Achillean Cane, who's potentially with the turtle on a 2-up save, -2 to hit, you're already going to be able to tie up the stuff that you need to for a turn or 2 when you want to. So I think you already have that ability in this list. Now, you can go overkill on it and really tie stuff up potentially, and that might be worthwhile. But I don't think you need it in your average matchup.
By the way, I've got to ask you: are you going to be running this list on the channel anytime soon?
I'm
getting requests for battle reports.
For sure, 100%. So I have 2 Alapexes. I just built my second one. But then I bought the new box to get 2 more. So I have 2 needing to be built, and then I got to paint the last 3. So I'm definitely working towards this list, and this is one that I'm super excited to play on the channel. It'll be a lot of fun.
I can see it in your face. I can see it in your face. Yeah. You're so excited to run this list. So if you are interested in seeing this list and you want to see it in action, Seasons of War on YouTube, awesome battle reports, very good, very tactical as well. And they do explain what they do and why they do it. So go give them a sub right now. Go check it out. You will see this list coming. Hopefully by Christmas. I'm going to put pressure on you.
Sounds good.
Put pressure on you. We're going to get a Christmas battle reports with this list in play.
Perfect. I'll commit to it here and now. So I'll have the 4 sharks ready, and we'll do a Christmas special.
Love it.
I'm actually playing the first list in a battle report tonight. So filming it tonight, so that'll be up either next week or the week after. So the first list, we'll see kind of the more aggro style offensive builds with the Eidolon. So that'll be coming soon too.
Love it. And you've obviously got the Leviathan. We talked a little bit about the Leviathan. We talk about the extending of the reason you've taken the Carapace is because it extends the drum from 12 to 15. And obviously that becomes really important because you did lose a little bit of movement in the War Scroll update. So keeping up with your fast moving sharks is going to be and your eels is going to be a little bit harder. So by extending that cover range to 15 inches, is it wholly within or is it just within?
Wholly within.
Wholly within. So keeping up wholly within 15 with a very fast-moving army, I can see the benefits there to give that additional +1 to save.
Yeah, no, it's great. So yeah, lots of interesting things. And like I was saying, this is a completely different build style that we didn't have before. of going more defensive control. I think honestly, you can even look at dropping the Soul Strider, and even adding an Eidolon in here, dropping some other stuff. There's so many options now. The real struggle with Deepkin now is choosing what toys I want to take in each list, because I want everything, and obviously you can't take everything.
Welcome to
Cities
of Sigmar.
Yeah, you're gonna have
Cities of Sigmar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So you'll see more balance. You'll see more varied lists. I've played with, my first test with the new stuff. I have Battle Report up. I was running an Achillean King, the Eidolon, a Leviathan, Thralls, defensive eels, a shark, and Morsar. So I did have everything, and realistically, while I only had 2 units of 3 Morsar in that, which in terms of the competitive meta is unheard of. I was between the shark, or sorry, the turtle and the Eidolon, I was never lacking for damage, right? And even the defensive eels, when they're +1 to wound, they have a good volume of attacks where they're getting a good amount of attacks in and damage through potentially. So.
And what's great as well is the Achillean Corp, which I think we're going to see more of now.
Yes.
Because I think 12 months ago, sharks were a hard sell, turtles were a hard sell, and things like the Achillean Corp, while it sounded good, it was just too much of a tax in some people's minds because they just want to run eels. But when you look at the Achillean Corp, and the rules are all right, once per phase, you can re-roll a hit, wound, save, run, or charge roll if they're within 12 of the Leviathan. So it makes that rule center power, giving a whole bunch of additional buffs as well as the buff it's already giving. But it encompasses the 1 Leviathan, it's 2 to 4 Achillean Guard, and the Alapex as well, 1 to 2 Alapexes. It's 2 to 4 Achillean Guard, 1 to 2 Alapexes. So that basically covers most of this army. Like, this is a pretty low drop army.
It's amazing. And so I've actually been running a Achillean Core. That was kind of my competitive build from the end of last year up until really the GHB and the introduction of Seraphon, where I needed to be a little more MSU, I felt. It's a great battalion, though. And actually, Domhain, the sub-faction, increases it from 4 units of Morsar to 6 units of Morsar. So you can actually go more MSU with your eels. You can have 6 units and still be a 3-drop. Again, 3-drop is an incredible spot to be. So playing that even before the turtle and sharks got their buff was super viable, and I loved it. And now it's even just way better. So I think you're 100% right. We'll see that a lot more.
Yeah, people would just take the 1 shark and just like, yep, that's my battalion tax. But now that the sharks are really good, the Leviathan has added value. When I look at the lists and I look at this list, I don't see there's a lot of fat. I don't feel like there's a lot of tax. You're taking what you want. You're taking a lot of good units. I think the thralls in the last list are a little bit of a tax, but in saying that, I still think there's a very good use for them right now. And the first list, people won't go for the thralls. They will target everything like your Eidolon. They'll attack the sharks. They'll attack the eels. They'll go for the Tidecaster. Like, the thralls will be the lowest of the priority, but they do damage. They are good objective scorers. They got a 6-inch move. They're fast. So less offense into them. Cool. Like it's literally no fat, I think, in both lists if you play them correctly. One thing that I was really disappointed about, and I think this is kind of about this list, but it's not about this list, which is the additional battalion that you got, which was that Blood Hunt battalion. And the reason I thought it was disappointing is because you were landlocked into one of the other sub-allegiances. You had to landlock into, which was...
I think it was Iron Rock.
Yeah, Iron Rock, yeah. That was the one that you locked into. And maybe a little bit of context maybe you can give to us. Why would you take this battalion? Would you go into this sub-allegiance, or do you think that this sub-allegiance is just suboptimal to like Domhain and Futhan? I
think the sub-allegiance is just too much of a sacrifice for the battalion. The battalion is interesting, but it's not groundbreaking. So what it does is it allows you to kind of have some sharks be an entourage for your Achillean King, and that's keyword Italian King. So that could have been Volturno's, I believe. But again, it's only an Iron Rock. But what they do is it lets you pass wounds off from your Italian King to the sharks, which just makes, again, Volturno's or your Italian King, if you're doing that kind of a build where you really want him to survive for the command ability, gives you 16 extra wounds, if not more, to pass off to. So that's huge. If you're really relying on that, I don't think it's necessarily one that even if you could take it, you would see pop up too much in the meta. But it's interesting. Maybe you want to take it just for that reliability, and you don't want to have to take. You want to lower drops, but you don't want to have to take the Achillean Core and a Leviathan or something.
Literally, what I'm about to say is that you don't want to go the turtle, you don't want to go down the Achillean Corp route, but you do want to get the extra CP, the extra artifact, and you're already going to take an Achillean King and 2 sharks. So at least even 1 shark, you don't have to take 1 shark. It's a pretty cheap battalion, taking 2 things.
Yeah.
So. No, this is great, man. I'm liking it. This is I did a Talking Deepkin about a couple of months ago, with someone who did the best at CanCon, and the amount of people who just commented going, "Boo, eels, boo!" Like, this is not interesting. When I look at both of these lists, they are interesting. I think there's a lot of questions like what would this list look like with Reavers? What would this look like with other particular battalions? But I think for myself, when I look at this discussion, there's a lot of cool things that you've brought to the table that people are either going to be inspired to go and buy, or maybe they've bought the Battle Force box, or they've bought something in the past that they've now got an excuse to put on the table and feel competitive. And we are talking competitive here. Yeah. If you want to be like me and want to run 4 turtles and put a bandana on them and call them the 4 Ninja Turtles and somehow convert your Eidolon into Master Splinter, that's cool. Be narrative, be fun. But if not, like, whatever, you do you.
Yeah. If you don't mind me going off.
Yeah, go
just
please.
As a quick kind of follow up, talking about other battalions, just as a quick one to highlight, like, and about the Reavers in particular, I think Namarti Corps is way more viable than it was before, which is a battalion you take, some thralls, you take some Reavers, and one of the foot heroes. You could just take that, build out that list, throw in a Leviathan for +1 to save and +1 to hit to all your Reaver or all your Namarti. Throw in an Eidolon for the +1 to wound. Then all your Namarti are on basically 2s and 2s, potentially re-rolling 1s, and you could be as low as a 3-drop in that list. That's like, man, that's something I'm excited to explore too. Like Namarti are what made me fall in love with this army. Like the Thralls, the Reavers, they're just such beautiful models. So that's what realistically, again, got me started with Deepkin. So again, just another build that people talked about kind of Namarti spam before, but nobody ever really did it. But now that actually could have legs and be a 3-drop. Like, that's pretty wild. So another fun thing to explore.
The only thing to remember, guys, is that your Namarti are on 32 mil bases. I know it's been a big gripe of the community. They're on 32s, and they've only got 1-inch attack. So I think that's been one of the big hindrance to thralls, is that you just can't take a big block and get them into combat. You get a lot of redundancy. If there was a 2-inch weapon, different story.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. There's at least more viability in taking thralls, at least as you've built a couple of small units, at minimum, a couple of other backfield holders, whether they are running up on the side and just being a distraction kind of effects, or never what I thought I'd call thralls a distraction kind of effects. But you can't ignore them. Like, they go in, if you ignore them, they can do some damage. If you target them, lol, you're not shooting at the other things that are really juicy. So it's like win-win.
Yeah, for sure.
Two final questions. By the way, hello, dog.
Yeah, he's been attacking me for the past 15 minutes.
Does the camera tilt a little bit? I am a big dog father, so.
So this is
yes.
This is Maverick. He is 10 months old. He's 90 pounds. So he's a big little boy. And then actually down here we also have this is Zelda. She's our. Sorry, he closed my mic. So we have 2 dogs, and they're this one's a big hood and 10 months old, crazy 90-pound puppy.
Amazing. My dog's in the other room at the moment. He's a little bit sick and coughing, so he's going to be away from the mic. This is amazing. Best end of stream ever. Big fans of the community's going wild for your dogs right now.
Oh, yeah, they're
bring us
stars.
back home. I've got two questions. One came from the chat earlier, and they were a Lumineth player asking, with the new War Scroll updates, are there any units that you might consider bringing into a Lumineth army from Deepkin as an ally?
Yeah, there are a number. Realistically, you could really make a case for almost anything except for Reavers. But like the Sharks here, the pile-in mechanic, it could be great with Lumineth as well. Now, Lumineth doesn't care as much about taking a hit because they're a little more resilient than Deepkin, but still great just for limiting the opponent's output and tying stuff up and whatnot. So yeah, definitely some play there with Allopexes. You can fit 3 in a list with as allies. But then you still have your kind of Morsar, Ishlay, and Dard are good. Maybe alternatives to Dawn Riders because they do have the benefit of fly. Maybe a little more output on the charge from the Morsar. So that's definitely play. Also worth noting, I tested out a while back. I ran a Soul Scryer and 20 Thralls as allies, which gives you 20 bodies deep striking off the edge in a Lumineth list. That's their big weakness, right? Like they don't have anything that can get around, teleport, and deep strike. So you can literally ally in those 3, put the 2 units of 10 Thralls in the Ether Sea with the Soul Scryer, get +3 to charge. If you do the units separate, good chance one of them's making it even without a command point reroll. And on the charge, before they get hit, they can dish out the damage like we talked about.
Could be, yeah. The Thralls could be. But by the way, to be able to say that very professionally while juggling 2 dogs, especially one that's seeking your attention right now, is just like 10 out of 10 content creator. You are a true master of your craft. Like
focused. Yeah,
bringing those, bringing those Thralls in as an ally could be really great to protect, let's say, a Techless or protect any particular really important thing. Because once you get towards Techless, those Thralls are just going to do absolute carnage to their opponent. I think the Allopexes, especially with their additional speed now at 14, could be awesome. They could support your Dawn Riders. At the same time, it could support my Age of Sigmar Pistoliers. It could support, anything. Like they're fast. At minimum, you just get units of 1 and just they kind of like annoy the board, tie people up, use the net. There's a lot of versatility. I think Deepkin as an ally is underutilized, and now that some of the points have dropped, now that we've had some War Scroll rewrites, and not all of the rules are now inherent in the Allegiance ability. We've got some cool stuff happening. I think they're very viable to be considering in your ally pool.
Yeah, definitely.
Last question, and I'll let you go handle the dogs wrap-up work. This has been really cool, Jordan. I'm glad we got through the end on the stream. The last question I've got for you, mate, is from all of your experience playing with this army, and you have been playing diverse armies, you just haven't been running eel spam, and your channel definitely has shown that off. What have you learned over your time that maybe someone who's picking up this book and maybe they've seen Broken Realms and they're now thinking, oh, I've been playing X before and now I really want to start a Deepkin army. What have you learned over your time in your experience in your games that maybe isn't as obvious as the battle tomes or, maybe unlocked potential? That dog is just off the charts. I love it. 10 out of 10. I want a doggo stream. Let's book it in with your 2 dogs, just the 2 dogs, not you.
For sure.
Final thoughts. What are the things you've learnt that aren't as obvious to the first person picking up this book?
Yeah, I would just say big things are to try to just look past what everyone's talking about with the damage output and kind of oppressive, aggressive nature. I've always tried to play Deepkin as a control army. Again, you need to kind of get over the fact that your stuff's going to die because it will die. But you, with Deepkin and your movement and flying, you have the option to choose when and where things die. And you can use them. You can sacrifice units to hold up a big unit of Hearthguard Berserkers or different things for a turn or 2. So really just being conscious of like where and when you're sacrificing things, and where you're forcing your opponent to spend their effort and their attention and their big units, because again, you control stuff with movement. You can control a lot of the board with movement and your positioning, but then you control shooting natively, so it gives you just a lot of control, kind of depending on what your opponent's trying to do, and you can really mess with their game plan. So
yeah, that's neat. That's neat. I think you're right. Like, I think there's a balance of being offensive and just throwing your stuff up the board and getting them to die too early. I think, you're very trigger happy. You want to get the charge in. You want it to happen so desperately, but it's a dance, and you got to pull back. You got to hold off and just wait for that right moment. And often the tides dictate the terms of battle. At the same time as well, I've seen a couple of Deepkin players be dictated by it, and they just hold back because they want the turn 3. But because I know that turn 3 or turn 2, if you flip the tide, because I know that's so important to you, as an opponent, I'm going to go straight for you, and I'm going to try to disable you because you are waiting till turn 3 or turn 2, or to generate X amount of command points to then, use your Achillean king. So I'm going to go alpha on you. So sometimes the best decision is to not play to the tides, but actually do what is happening on the table and play the game.
Exactly.
That's the thing I've learned from Deepkin, because I'm like, cool, if you can't flip and that's one of the questions I always ask my Deepkin player, can you flip the tide? And if you can't flip the tide, sweet. It means I've got 2 rounds to do mass damage, to pin you in, to shoot off your characters, to mortal wound things, to just buff up my army in preparation for turn 3.
Exactly. And yeah, Deepkin, that's their thing. If you can get into them on your terms, that's where they start to fall apart pretty quick.
Yeah, you'll have a bad time against, again, your turn 1 charging, again, I mentioned earlier. How have you gone with catapults? Have you played OBR catapults yet? Because they are, Mortis Praetorian are coming up in the meta, and Special K is doing some super buffs to those 5 damage catapults. And obviously a lot of damage output, but also obviously your shooting rules come into play. Have you had an opportunity to play against that type of build yet?
Yeah, a number of times, and just getting to control what they're shooting at is huge. So again, Ishlean Guard sitting in cover on a 3-up, they're gonna, the catapults don't have run to begin with, but it's, I'm choosing them to shoot at my tankiest unit. So that's great. Also, if you ally in something like Aether Wings from Stormcast are a great ally for Deepkin. So if you ally something like that in, making a catapult shoot at a unit of Aether Wings for a turn is really frustrating for OBR players.
Because they ignore line of sight, and obviously that comes into play as well with your Lumineth Wardens, the shooter guys, the Sentinels of the Wardens.
Sentinels.
Yeah, Sentinels are the shooters, the Wardens are the spears. Same deal, they ignore line of sight. They do, their shooting attack is 30, their threat range is the closest to 40s. But being able to dictate what's being shot at is pretty powerful. And I like the idea of bringing in something really cheap like those 40-point Aether Wings. Cheap.
Oh, they're incredible.
I was running these for 50 points. I thought they were incredible value. I thought I'd rather take that than a command point at 50 points when I was running Tempest Eye, very fast army, just having straight up, even just being able to seize an objective early for 50 points, was worth its weight in gold. But now that they've gone down to 40 points, and I'm sure there's some pretty cool conversions you could also, I've seen some Manta Ray type,
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, that's sweet. Yeah. It's a cool conversion. Or maybe it was yours that I saw.
Yeah,
I'm giving you credit. It's a pretty cool conversion. You're it's fine. All right. Jordan, this has been awesome. Has there any final thoughts, anything you want to share about the list before you give yourself and your channel a shout out? People have been asking in the chat where to find you. You are Seasons of War. We might have to get you back on to talk about Canada, ETC, and maybe the Canada scene. That might be something we've been doing some of these shows recently. They seem quite popular. But yeah, any final thoughts, and then you want to kind of give yourself a shout out where people can find more and kind of see these battle reports of the 2 lists?
Just obviously, just super happy, obviously, about what Deepkin changes and kind of adding more versatility and utility and flexibility. Getting to see, play different builds is super exciting, as well as obviously for our opponents, everyone's happy to see kind of more diversity on the table. But otherwise, yeah, you can find the channel, YouTube, Instagram is Season of War or Season of War. And then actually, just with you mentioning the Canadian ETC team, so this year or 2021, we're as a country planning to put our first Canadian ETC team forward for that, and so we're in the application process right now, which is on until December. So if there's any Canadians interested in kind of learning more and playing for the team, or throwing their name in the hat, you can head over to seasonofwar.com. I have a page up there with all information for applying and whatnot. And there's a few of us who were trying to organize it last year who are kind of overseeing and organizing it this year. So
that's great. And for anyone who doesn't know, the ETC, well, I talked about it last night or yesterday, depending on where you are in the world, on Down Under Sigmar. The ETC is the European Team Championship. It has a long history of wargaming. Warhammer Fantasy Battles had a long, illustrious career with ETC. It really only resumed last year, I think it was, Age of Sigmar. Age of Sigmar had its first event. I know Australia is sending their first team for Age of Sigmar, Canada. So check it out. It's going to be one of those best of the best kind of team formats. It's like 6-on-6, I think it is. It'll be very sweet. I may or may not have leaked that I'm considering applying for the coach role in 2022. So maybe.
Nice.
It's either that or America. I thought the coach can be the coach. I think that would be quite meta.
It'd be on brand.
It'd be on brand. Don't worry about spending $1,000 to go play in Europe. Let's be the coach and just be the coach and just laugh. Jordan, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoy these lists. I am invigorated to play against IDK, and I've been very, very critical of them just because I'm sick of playing the same list. It's just like a little bit of spice. Early on, there was a lot of cool stuff happening. There's been this 2-year lull of nothing, just eels and just rotating defense and offense. Now seeing thralls, now seeing sharks, now seeing turtles, now seeing just other things, the Eidolon of the Storm. I'm excited to go out and see how these all can play out. You've got dogs to handle. They want your attention.
He needs a walk. Yep.
Yeah, I took mine for a walk just before we kicked off. So, but I haven't eaten my Vegemite toast yet. So I'm going to go eat that. It's stale. Jordan, thanks for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. Mate, how good was that video? Surely it's going to go straight to the pool room. If you enjoyed that video, I would appreciate it if you crush that like button. And if you have an opinion, leave it in the comment section. That lets YouTube know it's a great video and it should share it with other Age of Sigmar players. Cheers to all the bloody legends here on the screen who have financially supported AOS Coach on Patreon on YouTube members. Their contributions have helped me improve the quality, frequency, and the variety of content on this channel. So cheers, guys, you are bloody legends. Until the next video, don't forget to shoot the heroes and have a good one.